Today we're going to really talk about if it's healthy to keep in touch with an ex after a breakup. So in my opinion, staying in touch with your ex without the right type of mindset only serves to feed the addictive nature of a breakup. So I think it's really only healthy to get back in touch with an ex if you have gotten to a place emotionally where you have outgrown them. Now, there's a lot to cover here around the psychology of what occurs when you stay in touch with an ex after a breakup. So here's a list of the few things that we're going to be talking about in this video episode. Number one, we're going to talk about staying in touch with them and why when you make this decision on if you're going to stay in touch with them, basically it should depend on your situational factors and your overall goals. We're also going to take a minute to learn about how often exes actually do stay in touch with one another. I actually came across some really interesting research detailing that. And we're also going to talk about what usually happens when you stay in touch with an ex. We're also going to talk about why it's important for you to view your breakup as an addiction. And finally, the importance of adopting the outgrowth mindset. Let's begin. So, let's start by answering the ultimate question first, before we start picking apart the psychology of everything happening behind the scenes. Should you stay in touch with your ex after your breakup? So in my opinion, it's not a simple yes or no question. A lot of people will make it yes or no. Oftentimes you'll go to Reddit or you'll go to Quora and you'll see people asking the general public, well, should you stay in touch with your ex? And you'll get these resounding, no, you should not stay in touch with your ex. It's completely unhealthy. But I actually think it's not as always simple as a simple yes or no question. I think whether or not you stay in touch with your ex should depend on two things. Number one is your overall goals, and number two is your situational factors. Now, what do I mean when I talk about these two things? Well, your overall goal is basically me referring to if you want to try to get your ex back or not. Generally speaking, everyone who comes to our website is at a crossroads. They're trying to figure out if they want to get their ex back, or they're trying to figure out if they want to get over their ex. Now, generally speaking, if you want to get your ex back, that can only really happen if you do get back in touch with them again after the breakup. However, we've actually seen better results for individuals who want to get over their ex by simply entering into a period of indefinite no contact. So essentially, if you want to get your ex back, you're going to have to get back in touch with them. If you want to get over your ex, sometimes just cutting them out and going to full indefinite no contact is the way to go. Of course, there are some situations where you're going to be forced to interact with your ex after a breakup no matter what, and that really revolves around the situational factors. So these are essentially factors that cause you to interact with your ex no matter what you do. Like you share a child with them, or you have a house with them, or you work together with them. In these types of situations, you're going to be forced to interact with them. But how you interact with them is an important thing to consider. My recommendation would be to read an article I did on my website called How to Act Around Your Ex After a Breakup. Basically, I go through a full breakdown of this is the proper way you should act if you're in the situational factors. This is the proper way you should act if you don't want to get them back, so on and so forth. For now, let's just move on and really answer what statistics are saying on how often exes stay in touch with one another. So what's always really aggravated me about the scientific community was how little research is made publicly available around breakups. In fact, I've never once been able to find a reputable study, save my own internal ones, about the average chances someone has of getting their ex back. The closest I was able to find was in 2015. There was a Associated Press poll done on asking people like, hey, how often have you gone back to an ex? And 43% of people admitted that they had. But that's a flawed study because that's asking them in their entire lives, have you ever gone back with an ex at least one time? We're looking at the average chances for every single breakup. Nothing like that has been done before. Interesting though, a recent study was released detailing how often exes do stay in touch with one another after a breakup. And I actually came across this through Psychology Today. And every time I post a video on YouTube, I basically show you the transcript of everything that I'm saying on my website. And I link to a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here. So the Psychology Today article, if you're interested in reading it, I highly recommend just hopping by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, and checking it out. But basically, there was a researcher named Lindsay Rodriguez. She studied 260 undergraduate students who had moved on from their breakup with someone else. She was interested in finding out how many of them kept in touch with their previous ex. Turns out, 40% of individuals did keep in touch with their exes. Of course, the study, like all breakup studies, was a bit flawed for our purposes here. It's only taking a look at individuals who had current partners. So essentially, the individual went through a breakup, they moved on to someone else, and then they got back in touch with their ex. Now, I'm willing to bet that if you focused on everyone during the post-breakup period, the real number of how often you stayed in touch with an ex would actually be a lot higher. So what should we take from this? Well, I think the thing to take from it, it's really normal for exes to keep in touch with one another after a breakup. But that doesn't really answer our question on if it's healthy for an individual to stay in touch.
Real quick, I want to say that if you're new to this YouTube channel or you're trying to figure out what you should be doing to get your ex back and you're trying to learn if you even have a chance in your specific circumstance, probably the smartest thing for you to do is actually stop by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, or take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz that can be found at exboyfriendrecovery.com. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, taking that free quiz is super easy to do. All you have to simply do is look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on the link you see there. It will take you directly to the quiz where you can fill it out and get an easy answer on what you should be doing going forward and overall what your chances look like in your specific situation. All right, so let's get you back to the video.
And I think probably looking at what happens most of the time after exes stay in touch with each other is a good thing to consider. So what usually happens to ex-couples that stay in touch with one another? Once again, I'm going to pull from that study that Lindsay Rodriguez did because it actually backs up what we've been seeing in the field ourselves. So specifically quoting from the Psychology Today article, most people didn't communicate with their ex too often, but a small subgroup, 13%, had contact with exes several times a week. So what does this tell us? It tells us that most likely, while it is highly probable that your ex and you will stay in touch after a breakup, the communication will eventually fizzle out. It's not going to last for very long. Either that or you end up in like a massive argument and history repeats itself. You go through a re-breakup phase, essentially. And this tracks with what we know about avoidant individuals. Now, if you look at my handy-dandy avoidant death wheel that I've talked about ad nauseum on the YouTube channel, basically it's like this 8-stage wheel that kind of tracks how an avoidant goes through a breakup. Really, stages 7, 8, and the re-revolution around stage 1 back this up, which is really they start to feel this nostalgia towards you, like the avoidant is going to feel this nostalgia towards you and are a lot more likely to give into that. But that doesn't mean it's long lasting. Often, unless you have the right mindset, getting back in touch with you for an avoidant can re-trigger their trauma and cause them to run again. Avoidants are fun, aren't they? So it's best to view your breakup, as weird as it sounds, as an addiction. So in 2010, the Journal of Neurophysiology decided to study the brains of 15 recently dumped individuals. And what they found was fascinating. Essentially, the parts of the brain that lit up during heartbreak were the exact same parts of the brain that lit up when a drug addict was going through a withdrawal period, specifically the nucleus accumbens. But what does that mean for our discussion in this topic? Well, it's actually best to view your breakup with your ex as an addiction. Often, if you don't have self-control and you go back into a discussion with them, it's akin to feeding that addiction. And really, that's the moral of the story. If you want me to level with you on what I think sets our coaching practice apart from all the others out there, it's probably our ability to get people into the right frame of mind before they even think about reaching out to their exes. And really, it revolves around this idea of adopting the outgrowth mindset. So while 2020 was one of the worst years on record due to the coronavirus, it was personally the year that ex-boyfriend recovery and my business underwent a pretty major philosophical shift, specifically as it relates to our approach on dealing with exes. And it all stemmed from a series of studies I did where I interviewed our success stories. I was trying to determine what made our success stories so successful, and I stumbled across a handful of trends. Number one, almost every single success story utilized a period of no contact, but what they did during that no contact made all the difference. Each one cited this phenomenon where they had gotten to a point where they didn't really want their exes back anymore. And it was that second point that stuck out to me. For years, I'd always been hearing about this phenomenon where our clients would try everything to get their exes back, inevitably fail, give up, and then that's when their ex came a-knocking. In fact, if you don't believe me, this happened as early as the third podcast episode I ever did back in 2015. That's like 200, 300 podcasts ago. We were starting to see this phenomenon creep up. So ever since learning this, we've updated all of our official definitions to include this outgrowth mindset. In fact, we even redid the way we approached a no contact rule. So if you look at our official definition, the no contact rule refers to a period of time where you cut off all conceivable communication with an ex after a breakup. The intent of this tactic should not be used to make your ex miss you, but instead should be used to rebuild your own life so that you outgrow your ex. By doing this, the no contact rule can have the added benefit of making an ex miss you. So the outgrowth mindset is found there. Here's my point. If you do want to get back in touch with an ex, then do not do so until you've gotten to a place emotionally where you've outgrown them. Now, we try to work that into our own no contact rules by teaching you concepts like the Holy Trinity or finding a magnum opus or finding a purpose outside of your ex. But what does it mean when we talk about outgrowing an ex? What like constitutes, like, you know, if you were to bake cookies, this is a weird analogy, but if you were to bake cookies, what would constitute the cookie as being done? What makes your outgrowth mindset being like, okay, done, I'm really willing and ready to talk to my ex? I think it means a couple of things. Number one, it means you're willing to move on from them. Like, authentically, you're okay moving on with them. Number two, it means you have found something that you care about more than them. Now, the key word there is something, not someone. And number three is it means you're okay if you don't get them back. Now, I bring up the no contact rule because really the thing people fail with isn't breaking. They do that, obviously. They break it constantly. It's a hard thing to get through. But most of the time, they are not doing any of the shadow work to get to that place emotionally where they're okay letting their ex go. And there's a psychological reason that this outgrowth mindset works. Remember before when we were talking about the avoidant death wheel? Well, if you dig into what makes an avoidant tick, there's a concept I'm always going on about called the nostalgia factor. And the way it works is really simple. Only once after you've broken up with an avoidant or they've broken up with you, have you moved on from them, or there is no perceived threat of you two getting back together, the avoidant actually gives themselves permission to miss you. They'll go through this period of nostalgia. And that's essentially what the outgrowth mindset does. It puts forth the attitude that you're okay not getting back together, that you don't want them back anymore, which makes them more likely to respond favorably to you basically once you reach out to them if you choose to do so. To basically encompass my thoughts on this, it's really hard to say if you should or should not reach out to an ex. It's not as easy, but in my opinion, staying in touch with an ex without the right type of mindset is only going to serve the addictive nature of the breakup. And a lot of times it's easy to hear something like this, like, oh, cool, outgrow them. That's easy. It's a whole different ball game to actually put it into practice.